Donc, bonjour à tous, bonjour à toutes. Hi, and welcome to everyone that will attend this very nice webinar today. Mon nom est Jonathan Pratt. My name is Jonathan Pratt. I'm the Executive Director for the RQMO, the directeur général du RQMO, le regroupement québécois des maladies orphelines, the Quebec Coalition for Orphan Diseases. So today the webinar will be presented especially in English because we receive very important people from the Canadian Rare Disease Network. So let me introduce right now to them. Hi everyone.
Hello, Jonathan.
Hello.
So today it's a special day because we talk about an initiative that started 1 year ago. A little bit before that for the steering committee. So it will be a very nice to hear what is going on at the federal level and to hear what is the CRDN. So, but first, maybe to start as an introduction, I will pass it to François to give maybe a bit of background on the CRDN and to just introduce yourself. And when it's done, we will be able to go to the presentation. So, François.
Alors, bonjour à tous et à toutes. C'est un plaisir de présenter le Réseau canadien des maladies rares. We're doing mostly in English today, and because of our colleagues, but it's such a privilege to be here. And the partnership with RQMO is very special, very important. And I'm a clinical geneticist. I've been practicing in rare disease genetics for many years at the University of Calgary, and I'm also director of the Children's Hospital Research Institute. But we'll introduce the CRDN more formally as we head into the presentation, but just a privilege to be here, and we have such an amazing team and some amazing partners. So onward.
Thank you, François. Maybe to go to Svenja.
Bonjour à tous. Hello, everyone. My name is Svenja Espenhan, and I'm the manager of the Canadian Rare Disease Network. And I'm just very thrilled to be here today and tell you a bit more about, CRDN, what we're doing, what we're hoping to do in the future, and hopefully move forward as a collective. And maybe I hand it over to Leanne, our Pillar 2 lead.
Oui, bonjour tout le monde. C'est un grand plaisir d'être ici avec vous aujourd'hui. Je suis un endocrinologue pédiatrique, and I am the Pillar 2 Therapeutic Innovations Lead as part of CRDN, and I'm excited to tell you about our pillar and the direction that we're taking as we go forward. So thanks for the opportunity today.
Thank you, Dr. Ward. And the last but not least, Ian.
Bonjour tout le monde. My name is Ian Stedman, so I don't have a medical or health science background. I'm not a physician, but I am a person who lives with a rare genetic condition and have a daughter who lives with one. So I am the CRDN pillar lead for the care support and empowerment pillar that I'll tell you a bit more about later. And I'm really pleased to be here, and I'm really glad that so many of you could attend online today. Thank you.
Yeah, and it's good to say it, Ian, because there's a lot of people that are attending right now. It could be on Facebook, on LinkedIn, and on YouTube. Well, first, before going to the presentation, I have 2 points of talk. So the first one would be to say that if you have any question or comments during the webinar, you can put it on the comment sections. In the platform that you're seeing us right now, and we will answer it at the end of the presentation. Second of all, I have to say a big thank you for the sponsors that are giving us the chance to do all the activities that we're doing for the month of February. So Amgen, Alexion, and Takeda for their platinum sponsor, Sanofi, Pfizer, Biogen, and Novartis for their gold sponsor. And you don't see it on screen, but we have also 2 silver partners who are Ultragenyx and Rhythm Pharmaceutical. So without further ado, I will leave the space for our speakers today. And like I said, if you have any comments or questions, feel free to put them in the comments. We will go back to them at the end of the presentation. So there you go.
Okay, so the Réseau Canadien des Maladies Rares is less than a year old. It was formally launched on Parliament Hill, actually, in the midst of a meeting that was incredibly well attended by RQMO representatives, CORD, and the beginning point for us in our presentations about CRDN is always to acknowledge the traditional lands that we all have the opportunity to live and thrive on. And this is very important for CRDN as we recognize the importance of Indigenous knowledge, wisdom, and perspectives in the pursuit of our shared goals, the shared goals of our organization, our communities, and our families. We're dedicated to building these meaningful relationships with Indigenous partners, to listening and learning from their experience, and respecting the Indigenous perspectives in our work for the betterment of all communities affected by rare diseases. We all, and I certainly personally, have the privilege of living, thriving, and working on Indigenous lands, and appreciate the learnings and opportunity to do so. So why a network? I think the thing that we want to make sure when we talk about the need for a network is not to take it from a gap perspective. There was tremendous amount of work, strength and opportunities in Canada. RQMO is a wonderful example of this. The rare disease strategy in Quebec, we admire. But in many ways, there was still a lack of cohesiveness to our approach to rare diseases, bringing together the various key partners in improving health outcomes for patients and families with rare diseases. That can be academic partners, clinical partners, funding partners, community organizations, industry. So we felt that there was still a significant opportunity for a network to come together as a bridging organization, a network of networks, but also to coalesce those efforts, to bring us together in a cohesive voice as much as possible at the national level, and amplify the local opportunities to catalyze and maximize rare disease efforts across Canada. So our vision, and all organizations should be driven by a strong vision, and it's really innovative care and research. And so we think about the network spanning both the perspectives of driving innovation in our approach to discovery, but also in the end we need a receptor in the care systems. And I say care systems in a very broad sense because they are diverse and very complex for rare disease families. That leads to this really important concept of empowering families and communities to live their full potential. So today you'll hear a lot about our mission, our raison d'être, as our vision, but notre mission, and what are we actually doing, and how we've organized our work. So maybe here I'll hand off to Svenja, who's been an absolute champion and leader and effective developer of our network, and deeply appreciate her work.
Thanks so much, François. Yeah, so I think this graphic really represents our work really well. So the CRDN really has a broad mandate that spans from coast to coast to coast and really works across the various disease boundaries. We've kind of structured it around 3 key pillars, as you can see in the graphic, that are centered around the patient and the families. So you can see the diagnostics and registries, which is led by Kim Boycott, and she's unfortunately unable to join us today. We have the innovative therapies, which is led by Leanne, and you will hear from her in a little while. And then we have care support and empowerment, which is led by Ian Stedman. And then we have this kind of 4th enabling pillar, I would say, that really spans across all areas and really aligns efforts and partnerships at sort of the national and the global levels. And you can see how the various partners and stakeholders, et cetera, are really wrapped around as well, and all driving towards supporting patients and their families and driving forward our goals and our mandate ultimately. And so in a way, it's a kind of really holistic approach that we are taking to supporting patients and families with rare diseases. And oftentimes, we talk about sort of that research to care transformation framework that really underlines our work. And François already touched upon that a little bit. So in this graphic, again, it's the same kind of model, but just presented slightly differently. You can see our 3 key pillars that are really centered on the patient, But this time you can see how we really need to connect sort of the research to care spheres to really be able to drive meaningful impacts and improvements for patients and families in Canada. And so, as François mentioned, we are still really early on in our development and in our growth. We're just coming up to our 1-year anniversary, but collaboration and co-creation is really at the heart, and it will be really important for what we are doing. And so on this slide, I just wanted to show a couple of logos of kind of organizations and initiatives. And, we have engaged representatives from these organizations and initiatives to co-create our roadmap. But we also recognize that there are many, many other organizations and initiatives working in the rare disease space. And, as we're growing and developing, we actively want to work towards understanding the space and who are the various players and how we can bring them in to this broad vision of CRDN and collectively drive forward our impact and our goals. And so the key is really that we don't want to duplicate any efforts and we don't want to own any efforts. We really want to build connection and bridges and bring the various players together to align priorities and efforts, to share knowledge and expertise and resources, and really collectively drive forward improvements for patients and families in Canada. And so while we are still early on, we do have a robust mandate and we have a governance structure, as you can see on this slide. So we have our incredible steering committee that is really driving and directing the activities of the CRDN. And I will show you the individuals that are part of the steering committee just in a second. And then we have secretariat support staff, kind of enabling and supporting the network as it is at this point. And so that includes myself and an engagement coordinator, Karishma, who is doing all our social medias and, communication aspects. And as I mentioned, we have developed our pillar groups. These key individuals have helped us develop our strategic roadmap. And moving forward, you can see some of the other committees and councils that we hope to establish. So we hope to have an advisory committee and a patient and family advisory council, again, aligning kind of the national rare disease initiatives and partnerships, and then also globally. And then we also recognize that industry plays a crucial role, and we will need to figure out how we want to involve industry in the network moving forward and collaborate and partner with industry. And so as promised, here are some of the incredible individuals behind CRDN, our steering committee, really a coalition of the willing people that really are dedicating their time and contributing to the network. And I'm sure many of these faces are familiar to you. As I said, we have our leaders, but we also have Gail Ouellette, who is obviously very renowned within Quebec. We also have Duhane Wong-Riga from CORD, and then other researchers and clinician researchers from across Canada that are really dedicating their time towards supporting CRDN and driving our mandate forward. And so as we're moving towards telling you a bit more about our strategic plan, we've really been busy in the first year around co-developing our strategic plans. We really wanted to connect with experts across the various sectors to shape our strategic plan. And so we developed our pillar groups and have 34 individuals from across Canada and various sectors. And these individuals met over 12 times, I believe. And we had some really meaningful conversations around identifying strengths, but also gaps. And then figuring out, what should CRDN be doing? What should be our strategic priorities? How do we want to work? And how do we want to make sure that we are not duplicating efforts, but leveraging resources and efforts that already exist? And so that allowed us to co-develop our strategic plan. And then we recognize that, we want to have broader input. We want to give opportunities to the broader community to provide their feedback. And so we held a virtual town hall in October where we presented our draft strategic plan. And then we also launched a community survey where the broader community was able to provide feedback and their thoughts on our strategic plan and goals. And that was really crucial because it helps us to refine our strategic plan. And it ensures that it reflects the voices of those we really want to serve. And we really hope that our strategic plan will allow us to move forward with a strong understanding of needs and opportunities, and it will guide our efforts and collaborative efforts, and in particular also will allow us to identify how and where we want to partner to enable some of these goals that we've identified. And so while our pillar leads will dive into their pillars and their specific goals in a lot more detail just in a second, I just wanted to give a brief overview of this is our entire strategic plan. You can see our 3 key pillars, and then you can see our 4th pillar, which I think is pretty self-explanatory, really focusing on how do we connect the various initiatives and efforts nationally and build those bridges, but then also how do we connect to some of the global efforts and initiatives that are happening, and how do we bring best practices over to Canada so that our patients here can really benefit from those advancements. So with that, we're going to go dive into diagnostics and registries, our pillar 1. And as I said, Kim is unfortunately unable to join us, but François is a geneticist by training as well, so he will talk a little bit about pillar 1.
So the work was really trying to identify the major opportunities to improve outcomes, and we've all recognized in our field, and for those of you who are patients and families, the challenges of arriving at that right time, right diagnosis, right care group. And so, broadly called the diagnostic journey, it's real, it's impactful, it delays access to opportunities to screen and improve outcomes for families. So the goal of this one was to try and understand this complex journey, and why is it so complex, and where are the inflection points where nationally, but obviously many of these care points are local. Where do you improve access? So the pillar 1 also went through a significant amount of work, and I just want to acknowledge Kim's lead. Kim's been a colleague and an amazing contributor to national impact and international impact in rare diseases. So we have a world-class leader in this space, but really enabled by an incredibly diverse group of pillar members who have really leaned in to work on the development of a strategic plan. And I think what impresses me with the strategic plan work is how not only visionary a lot of the strategic plan, but also quite pragmatic. What are the things that can actually be actioned by an organization and its partners like CRDN? So if you look at the pillar 1 strategic plan, it's quite ambitious, but the goals are I think, aligned completely with this concept of reducing the time it takes to identify patients with rare diseases. And that's not only just access to diagnostics, it can be better awareness, it can be better screening, better registries. So the 5 high priorities are listed there, and we can think about them as, all rare disease patients in an aspirational way would receive the right diagnostic test at the right time, regardless of where they live in Canada. So again, thinking about this kind of coast to coast to coast approach. How do we get our diagnostic laboratories? And Quebec's a leader in this space, a very strong network of diagnostic laboratories working together. But how do those diagnostic laboratories also benefit from a larger network of laboratories working together, sharing variant information and approaches, but also standards of care? So that's an integrating diagnostic work across Canada approach. All families will have access to relevant registries. Registries are crucial, and many of the registries in Canada are incredible, and they're mostly, in many ways, led by patients and family organizations who have taken upon themselves to identify in a consistent way, in a thoughtful way, in a relevant way, their community and represent their community. The goal is obviously to do so in a more consistent way so that the families who have rare diseases, individuals who have rare diseases, are identifiable and become eligible for secondary research and contact. And I think we're going to see an increasing era, and it's an incredibly exciting era in rare diseases, more opportunities to contribute to development of novel therapies, diagnostic pipelines, but also a better understanding of what are the true needs of families, what happens in the day-to-day life of families with rare diseases that we need to identify and then co-develop approaches to improving. We have an advocacy role in some ways. We think that diagnostics and research has to become a political priority, or maintain or become an amplified political priority, and sustainable funding. And we just actually held a national workshop on behalf of Health Canada on improving access to, national infrastructure that would support, a genomics ecosystem where our data is held as a national resource, and governed in a way that respects the rights of patients and communities. So how do we do that? How do we arrive at a better national infrastructure, but also a political will to maintain and amplify the funding that's available for rare disease families and communities? And the last one is that we become internationally recognized. And we are in many specific areas, but we're not broadly as a country. But also mechanisms of discovery, translation of new technologies in the clinic. So can we develop a best-in-class model? And at the bottom there, you can see some aspirational, but I think real benefits to this approach in Pillar 1 of better healthcare provider knowledge. So how do we improve knowledge about rare diseases that will improve access to the right diagnostic test or care pathways? Wider use of genetic testing, so concepts of mainstreaming, bringing testing more in the forefront of the diagnostic odyssey as opposed to the kind of last thing you end up doing. The turnaround time around testing, better data to prove insights into care, and just that genomics in many ways gets implemented into our healthcare lexicon and systems.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Svenja and Francois, for setting this up so nicely. Of course, rare disease diagnostics flow very nicely into effective, innovative therapies. You have to have a diagnosis in order to gain access to effective therapies, so that's always the first step. It's my pleasure to talk about Pillar 2, the innovative therapies. And when we conceived of this aspect of the CRDN, we thought about the ways in which innovative therapies are divided into 4 sort of sequential chapters, if you will. Of course, there's the preclinical pipeline where logical therapeutic targets are developed first in animal models in order to show proof of principle efficacy and safety. And when we did our environmental scan of the interest in innovative therapies in Canada, it was quite remarkable the extent to which we heard from stakeholders and the extent to which they want to invest in this aspect of innovative therapies in Canada. And then, of course, once you have a promising therapeutic target, then you take that to rigorous clinical trials in order to show definitive efficacy and also to delineate the safety of a drug in humans. And then hopefully the goal is that would lead to approvals and then pathways to drug access. And then once you have an approved therapy that has an access pathway, then you have to get it into the clinic. And that's not a step that can be minimized. So you need physicians who have the expertise in order to prescribe the therapy and know how to manage the patient in terms of monitoring efficacy and also managing any side effects that might occur. And so we think that this innovative therapies pillar also needs to include aspects that take care of the patient within the clinic itself that would be developing the therapy. Next slide. So to take those chapters and bring them to life and give them a robust backbone, we had engagement sessions over the last few months. And just as Francois said about his diagnostic pillar, we've got a wonderful group of experts, key opinion leaders in innovative therapies from across Canada. And I just want to acknowledge these individuals who represent different disease areas that are working on innovative therapies and different aspects of innovative therapy development. This has been a really great group to work with, and you can see that there's representation by the Canadian Organization for Rare Disorders, Durhane Wong-Rieger, as well as Rare Kids Can, Brianne Stewart and Terry Lacaze, Maz Montoya, as well as others. So a really great group of stakeholders for which I'm grateful in developing the ideas that I'll tell you about next. So this is also very aspirational, very ambitious, but certainly speaks to the needs that we think Canadians have across the country and also the needs that were brought to light in our engagement sessions. So this is what we hope to achieve. We would like to see Canada as a leader in the discovery and validation of novel therapeutic targets and treatments for rare disease patients. We'd like to see the preclinical work take place more and more in Canada and have a homegrown approach to developing novel targets for therapeutic interventions in this space. And then we think that there's a real need to ensure that all rare disease patients, no matter what their age, no matter where they live in this vast country, no matter what their social context, no matter their distance from a tertiary care center, that they'll have equitable access to clinical trials and innovative therapies. So we want to really make sure that as we go forward in this space, that we identify barriers and that we become an organization that is motivated to address those barriers, working with a number of different partners. Often rare diseases are identified in childhood, and so we have to be mindful of our adult patients for whom diagnoses may yet have been elusive. And at the same time, we need to make sure that adults have appropriate access to therapies as well. So this is certainly something that's on the minds of the Pillar 2 Innovative Therapeutics. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we have to make sure that these therapies are readily integrated into clinical practice to improve patient care and outcomes. And so this involves an incredible educational platform to ensure that healthcare providers, not just physicians and nurses, but support care workers, OT, PT, social work, mental health workers, that they understand the nuances that are involved in delivering a novel therapeutic to an individual so that we can maximally support them on their journey. And we have some exciting partnerships that are being struck up across the country with branches of medicine that are important for this particular aim. And then we hope by achieving one day these three goals that Canada will ultimately be recognized globally for its rare disease clinical trials and its market potential. Just as Francois said, there's no question we have profound expertise in Canada in different areas, and CRDN is seeking to bring those areas of expertise together and those individuals together so that Canada attracts investment and accelerates access to innovative therapies. So that's our vision. It's written into our strategic plan, and we've appreciated the input, as I said, of the Pillar 2 committee members, as well as the stakeholders who contributed to the survey that was sent out over the summer. And we look forward to working with the broader community as we facilitate the achievement of these goals over the next few years. So thank you very much for this opportunity.
And that leaves me. Hi, everyone. So let me tell you a little bit more about myself so you understand what this pillar is trying to do. I was an individual who, like Leanne just mentioned, as an adult was diagnosed in my 30s. And it was because my daughter had access to diagnosis before she turned 1. So there's a lot that my journey has looked like and has given me exposure to that hers will not. And so as we put, this care support and empowerment pillar together, our thinking was we need to sit around the table with patients and caregivers and talk and figure out what is it about their journeys and their experiences that we as an organization need to be alive to. And as you can imagine, everything you've heard about the other pillars came up in our conversations with patients and caregivers because it's all about patients. We've all had those experiences at every stage of, delayed diagnosis for me, 32 years, access to therapeutics for me, again, 32 years until I had access to an effective therapeutic. Tried a whole lot before then, but not the right ones. And so there's parts of what we want to do in Pillar 3 or that we talk about in Pillar 3 that are really covered well in Pillars 1 and 2. And that's good because it means that we at Pillar 3 can continue to have input into and play a role in the progress of Pillars 1 and 2 and the overall organization. But as we sit around the table and talk about what it is we want to do, these are the kinds of themes that have come up. We want to make sure that we're doing having great conversations about community and home-based care. There's a shift that's happening in healthcare, and we need to be there with it in the rare disease community. We need to do a better job of mental health and psychosocial support. That's something that the rare disease community itself hasn't been overly motivated to figure out, and so we need to be going forward. There are a lot of barriers, financial and otherwise, so we need to make sure that we as an organization are helping to find those resources to create supports for patients, carers, caregivers. A big part of what we want to do is to help bring together the information that's out there and make it accessible. And you'll see that our QMO and the iRare centers, if you are helping out with that. And so care transition, resource navigation, there's just a whole lot that we can do to help improve care support and empowerment for rare disease families and patients. Let me just quickly take a minute to acknowledge those who have come together over and over again for our pillar. These are leaders within the rare disease space. For the most part, people who have been navigating the rare disease space as patients and carers and caregivers themselves. But also now, as many of you who are on the call might know, it becomes a big part of your life, and it does become, like it has for me, your professional motivation. So for many of us, because of what we've gone through, because of our lack of access to answers, it is all consuming, and it changes our trajectories. So many of the people that we've been able to talk to are those for whom they've had, different careers before being confronted with the rare disease journey. And so they bring a breadth of knowledge and backgrounds and experiences, and just a great nuanced understanding of more than just the journey they've been on personally, but also how that fits into the broader kind of extrapolated journey of others. So quickly acknowledge all of these wonderful people for dedicating their time. And as Svenja said earlier, it's a coalition of willing, and that makes it hard, but also makes it wonderful to work with people, because we know that everyone around the table is there because they care. And you see Jonathan down there as well. So Gail, again, we're putting Gail and Durhan to work on almost every pillar. We do a good job. Let's move on. So in our year of dialogue leading up to the strategic plan and the socialization of that plan and the putting it out there in the community for feedback, we've landed on, again, 4 what we think are aspirational pillars. Not that we think they're overly aspirational in the sense that we can't achieve them, but they are aspirational in the sense that we do need to slow down and ask ourselves, what's step 1, what's step 2, what's step 3? We can't solve everything with a wave of a magic wand. So we're trying to do it in a way where our community can come together and help to put the building blocks together. So number 1 is we want to make sure that rare disease patients, families, caregivers have access to the resources and supports they need. For every one of us on this call who's watching and has gone through the journey, the diagnostic odyssey from Pillar 1, you know that at every step of that odyssey, there's a different set or subset of resources and supports that you need. So our pillar is trying to figure out how to map all of that. What can we do? What can be done in Pillar 1, Pillar 2, but what's left over in Pillar 3, and how do we bring all that together? So here I want to give a big shout out to Gail Willette and the iRare Centers. If you haven't looked up the iRare Centers, I implore you to do so. Wonderful initiative where a lot of information is being coalesced for the community. Number 2, we want to make sure that all individuals feel empowered and engaged in meaningful opportunities. I found for myself, it's been 12 years since my diagnosis, and it's taken 10 of those years for me to feel confident in this space, putting myself out there. And now I get to participate in research projects and programs like this one, the CRDN, and trying to build an infrastructure and a community. And we want others to feel that empowerment much earlier in their diagnostic story or in their family story. So we want to put out more supports, not just, here's how you get involved, but here's how we can help you find the education you need to feel comfortable in these spaces. This is a complex healthcare space. It absolutely is. And so for patients coming in, it's overwhelming, and we want to make sure that we're supporting and providing opportunities. We want to make sure that we do, as I mentioned earlier, a better job of figuring out what the resources and supports are for people living with a knowledge of what their rare disease is, but also pre-diagnosis. There is a lot of up and down mentally. And I sometimes sit back and reflect on my 32 years. And while I didn't know that what I was going through was probably something for which I needed some support, I reflect on it and I think, yeah, there were days where this was really lonely and this felt like I was abandoned by the system. And so we as a community probably need to recognize that for those coming up, going through what we've gone through, it would be nice if they had easier access to the supports they need, social, mental health supports. And then finally, a big ambitious goal, but one that we have to strive towards. When I was diagnosed, there was no patient community within my disease space. So over 10 years, we've tried to create one. And that's similar for many of us because there is just under 10,000 known rare genetic conditions. There's not that many different patient support groups in this country. So we do need to unify as a community, not only to support those who have patient groups, but to support those and to kind of welcome those who don't have patient groups and who may never have patient groups. but also to kind of create shared resources for those who are trying to build and grow supports within their smaller communities within this broader, wonderful rare disease community. So I'm not going to go through the benefits at the bottom, but I think you all see, if you're a patient or a caregiver or a care provider on this call, that we need to do a better job in all of these things, and we need to do it in a way that coalesces and brings the community together. So please reach out if you have thoughts, and feel free to share them with us.
Thanks. Before we head into the Q&A, which Jonathan will guide us through, I just want to reflect a little bit. You know, I've spent my career in a space that I can only acknowledge at some level of understanding of what it's like to be a family member or a care provider or a person with a rare disease. But it's really the patient voices that are the important voices. So in the end, we're here to improve those outcomes and to listen and to recognize and amplify your voice, so you don't feel so alone sometimes. I think in many ways we've left the community a bit alone as a group of care providers and scholars and researchers to tackle all of this in the midst of everything else that they're trying to be, you know, a mother, a father, a patient, care provider. So I just want to acknowledge the tremendous work by our network and the partnerships, which in the end is going to be what's going to advance us forward. The network itself is funded by a federal grant called the Canada First Research Excellence Fund Award, called One Child Every Child, held at the University of Calgary to amplify and improve the outcomes of children. But we have a broad vision at CRDN of all patients with rare diseases. And the challenges are different, but they're important across the lifespan. So with that, I acknowledge and thank our presenters, but also mostly our partners and the people who've worked on the working groups, and hand this back to Jonathan. Thank you for your patience.
Well, thank you for this great presentation. I hope that everyone who is seeing the webinar right now have a better knowledge about what is the CRDN. So I think in the title of the presentation, it said who, what, and why. So I think that mostly those three questions have been really well answered. So thank you to the four of you. Like I said at the beginning of the webinar, if you have any questions or comments, you can put it either on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube, and we will be able to answer it. I have to just to add. So if anybody is interested in knowing more about the CRDN, you can visit their website, so canadianrdn.ca. It's really easy to look at. It's really well presented, nice menus and all that stuff. So it's really it's really easy to navigate. So we have a first question from David Cybulski on YouTube. He asked, what is the priority for Pillar 3? So Ian, you didn't go in the different benefits, but maybe if you can answer to the question. So what is the main priority for Pillar 3?
Everything. No, so what we've tried to do is, because it is, a coalition of the willing, and we've got people coming together, we've tried to start making progress on all four of those goals. Actually, I think the one that we've had the hardest time getting started with is the third one, which is about mental health supports. But thank you for the question, by the way, but if you take some time to work around and mull about on the website that I think Jonathan just posted the link to, you'll see that we've started to put up a patient board for opportunities. We have a newsletter that goes out that explains what's happening within the rare disease community. Our wonderful communications staff posts events ongoing, so people can just drop into different sessions and be a fly on the wall and learn. I found, for me, even not having a healthcare background, over the 12 years I've been in this space, the more I can just sit there and not be asked to say anything or do anything, but just to observe, the more I can absorb, the more I can learn, the more comfortable I can feel with the language, with the dialogue. It's not just scientific, it's policy, it's everything. There's just everything to do with healthcare is to do with rare diseases, right? We just have to look at it through a particular lens, but there's no shortcuts. And so it's a lot. So we've had these opportunity boards posted. We ask our community to send us their opportunities and their events when they're there. We've been doing some work with Deborah Marshall at U Calgary. They've put out a call. Actually, I think there's been two for. Did you want to jump in? It's okay. Two cohorts of, and I'm blanking on the acronym, but
PACER.
PACER.
PACER. Yeah.
PACER cohorts. So we've been working with community members to try to help promote opportunities, right, for patients to get involved. And I think you'll see that because of the rare disease strategy, we've spent a lot of time within the rare disease community with leaders like those who are on the Pillar 3, trying to figure out our next steps on how do we coalesce the community around something. Is that we don't necessarily think that we represent the community. We don't want to be a voice for the community, but we need to find spaces in which the community can engage with itself and with one another and to establish its own priorities. Do we want, for example, more resources available for how to start an organization or how to start a registry? What are the kinds of things the community wants? So I think next step, David, might be for us to engage with the community and say, how do we want to support each other as part of Pillar 3, Priority 4? So a lot of community consultation there. But
perfect. Well, thank you for the answer, Ian. It's I think it's well it was well answered. Maybe I'll jump ahead on what you mentioned about the federal strategy on rare disease. So we know that at the moment we have 5 provinces that already signed the bilateral agreement. Quebec is not part of it for now. We hope it will come well in the near future. But after those bilateral agreement will be signed for each province, and within the economic situation that we have right now, and also the planned election that we're supposed to have in the spring. What are your expectations of the next step in the rare disease space in general? So it's a really broad question, but maybe you can answer a small portion for each of you 4. But what are your expectations, and what if you had like Justin Trudeau or Pierre Poilievre in front of you, what would be the main message that the CRDN wants to put forward?
Yeah, I think from the highest kind of balcony perspective, it's just continued emphasis and prioritization of the opportunity, and we have to look at it as an opportunity to improve health and wellness for patients with rare diseases. And the opportunity cost of not doing so is threatening. It's threatening the health and wellness of Canadians. It's threatening to the sustainability of our healthcare systems. It's threatening, frankly, to the sustainability of our economy. So I think that's one perspective. Is one, can we maintain that kind of voice and vision and really sustainable funding that was initiated through the rare disease strategy? I think the second one is in many ways a bit of a broader one. I view in a broader health perspective as rare diseases as being at the leading edge of a new whole wave of approaching wraparound care, holistic care, supportive families and communities, but also this precision medicine approach. And you need both. But if we can't do this, if we as a society can't do this for rare diseases, we can't do it for all diseases. So this is the opportunity to learn how to walk and run and improve the lives, health and wellness outcomes for a group of patients, a very, very important group of patients. But the approach is going to be generalizable. So we need a new system of approaching this question. I don't know if any of my colleagues, Leanne, from a...
Yeah, no, I just echo what you said. I think that if we can better tune the healthcare system to individuals with rare diseases, then we will also allow all boats to rise. Think about patients with common conditions who present with rare manifestations of those common conditions. Think about patients with common conditions who have unmet needs with respect to mental health and other supports that are needed to manage their more frequent and common disorders. So I don't really think we need to necessarily think about segregating rare disease from common. I think that this is an overall narrative that applies across the healthcare system to, in general, better meet the needs of Canadians as we go forward in their health and wellness.
And I might add, I think one of the goals of CRDN, when it's all said and done, one of the things that we'll be able to accomplish is recognizing that there's this really broad, wide landscape of really good work happening, and it's all really moving towards personalized precision healthcare, not just therapeutics, but healthcare in a broader sense. But it's a tapestry of it's not a tapestry yet. It's just a bunch of little squares, and they're everywhere, all over the country, and lots of different people involved. But CRDN, part of our mission then is to start weaving it together as a tapestry, so that when we go and sit in the room with the federal government and the provincial governments, we can say, look, there is something special happening here. We just have to see it as a whole and not as a bunch of different parts and disparate parts. And let's help you do that.
Great. Maybe we have one last question from Linda Lafontaine on YouTube. And we have another one that just went in. So, are you considering open science as a way to connect all registries? We just had a webinar last week on open science, so, and Linda was part of it. So, I guess that's where the question is coming.
Ian, do you want to? You look like you're ready to go.
Yeah, I sit on the Canada Drug or CDA, I guess it's called now, right? Canada Drug Agency. They're doing a registry push where they put out calls for people to seek funding to build registries. And one of the conversations we're having is, how do we make sure that they're interoperable, and so that we can build something, right? We want the registries themselves to be branches, but we want there to be a big tree going up the middle that they can all kind of connect into. And that is the vision, Linda. That's the vision. I don't know if we get there in 1 year or 5 years, but if we don't start moving there, we won't be able to build a system that allows for all of the branches to connect to the main tree trunk, so that we can have that interoperability and access at a national level. So yes, absolutely. Who gets access to it? I mean, it's a registry, it's patient data. It can't be open. It's got to go through some sort of validation and governance system to see who gets access to it. But your point is well taken with respect to making sure that we have equitable access across the country to these things that we're trying to build.
Yeah, and it's going to be a big challenge, I guess, to make sure that each registry is interoperable. It's not an easy word, sorry, within each other. So we have maybe one last question from David Cybulski again. Thank you for the question. How do you see balancing the need for primary care versus the goal of precision care?
Yeah,
I don't know who wants to answer it.
Yeah, maybe I'll dive in. I expect Leanne and Ian Svenja will all have thoughts. I wouldn't view them as different. I think that I view precision health or precision care as really as deep as possible in understanding of a patient's biomedical and social needs. And that should be occurring at all levels of our system, and we need to empower the primary care providers, who are incredibly challenged and busy, to have the right tools to be able to take this approach and embed it in their systems, which many of them are already doing. And so a cohesive system across that ecosystem of care providers. I think part of the other end of the spectrum is then the expense of the so-called high-cost precision therapies. And I think we just need better methods of understanding cost and cost narratives when it comes to high-cost therapies, but also disorders and conditions that have an incredibly significant lifespan cost, right? So we need a whole other approach to thinking about valuing things like cost and precision health costs. But I think some precision healthcare can be very, very cost effective, can be implemented at the front line, it can be mainstreamed in a very, very effective way that would improve access. But Leanne, thoughts on?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that really excites me about the path forward is thinking about ways to integrate rare understanding and rare education into the primary healthcare landscape. Because when you think about patients with rare conditions and how they sort of bounce around in primary care, often for long periods of time because their condition goes unnoticed. And of course, that's understandable because it isn't easy to put together their diagnosis oftentimes. And so if we can chisel that, if we can fine tune that and really empower that timely diagnosis, we're going to save primary healthcare providers time and then collaborate to work together in order to deliver therapies. And altogether, I think when we are working in a way that is more tuned to rare, that's more chiseled to their needs, will ultimately save the time of healthcare providers and patients alike. And ultimately, that's got to be a good thing for the system.
And just case in point for me, 32 years, over 200 visits to primary care. Since my diagnosis 12 years ago, I might have stepped into primary care 2 times. And heaven only knows what the cost to the system was of me being misdiagnosed for that long. No idea how to quantify that.
Yeah.
Wow, great comments and great answer to the question. I think it's it was a pleasure to have you four on the screen for presenting the CRDN. It was I hope that everyone who followed us on either on Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube really enjoyed it. I know maybe some we, even if we advertise the this webinar of today in English, I know that some people are not really into English language, but you can go on our YouTube channel on the Regroupement Québécois des Maladies Orphelines, and you can go in the direct section, so live section. You will have again access to the presentation, and you can choose in the parameters, in the subtitles, you can put to translate automatically in French. So the presentation will still be in English, but at least you will be able to follow the subtitles in French. So that's one way you can look at it. So again, thank you to Dr. Ward, Dr. Stedman, Dr. Espagnan, and Dr. Bernier. It was really nice to have the four of you to present the CRDN, and I hope that everyone enjoyed it. Again, if you have any questions or you want to follow what CRDN is doing, you can look on their website, canadianrdn.ca. And so thank you to everyone.
Thanks so much.
So
Bye-bye.
before we left, we will see we have a survey in the ending video of the webinar, so you can it's a QR code, so you can take a picture of it. The link will be also in the comment section in each of the platform, so you can fill different types of questions regarding each webinar that we held since the beginning of the month of February. And for the last meeting, so the last webinar we will have will be on Wednesday. It will be on patient partner. So le dernier webinaire de la saison du mois de février 2025 va être ce mercredi à midi, et on va traiter justement de recherche et du patient partenaire. So merci and have a nice day to everyone.